apologies for the lack of content lately. I unfortunately got myself caught up in a few things, but hopefully we can get things back onto a reasonable schedule. And speaking of reasonable schedule, it's that time again for Cardfight Vanguard Bear Watch, boys! That's right, our big buddy the bear returned as he wreaked havoc on a stadium. He brought all his forest friends, and they all sat there, and Nesca was like, it's okay, everyone can come back. And the people really shouldn't come back, because when these bears go to the concession stand, they don't want chicken fingers, they want your fingers. Yes, I just made that pun. The big thing about the animal thing is that I think it's so weird and out of left field, and is probably a bad idea for a show trying to feel like a realistic universe, but I don't know, I just can't help but laugh at it. But that's neither here nor there at the moment. So, yeah, actually, kind of is. So, I have an interesting theory about these two episodes, and that is that it is feeding in to a deeper, more grounded message about parental relationships and sort of the way parental relationships develop and how they change and how they affect how we ourselves grow up. Now, ultimately, we know the sort of point to this show is how Shin was able to become a father figure to Misaki. And what's sort of interesting is we see a lot of similar dynamics going on here, which is kind of nice because so many times card game animes, and just shonens in general, revolve around the rival relationship or the best friend relationship or, to a lesser extent, the romantic relationship. But here, we have a lot of characters who seem to look to each other as sort of parental figures. And I know a lot of these characters are too close in age to actually be parents to each other, but I still feel like that is what they're going for, and I think that is very interesting. And I feel like it sort of sets it up with these two episodes by showing the opposite of a parental relationship, or not really the opposite, but follow me on this. So in the fight from last week's episode, it revolves around Mark and I still can't remember his name, Narukami guy, in this very fun, happy-go-lucky fight. They don't even really care about what's actually going on with all the animals around them. They're just having fun card fighting. And there aren't really any stakes here to be had. They don't really have to think about the greater world around them. Yes, Mark is trying to help Shin save card capital, but ultimately, Mark's life isn't really affected that much based on the outcome of all this. He's really just helping a friend for the sake of helping a friend. And same for the other guy. He's literally here because he just wants to wear a goofy costume for 5 minutes. That is all these characters have invested into this. Afterwards, they'll just go back to their simple, fun-loving, happy lives. And what's sort of interesting is that this week's episode is the exact opposite and deals with what happens when your life gets more complicated, when it all sort of expands, and how that changes you and how that can inevitably hurt the people around you. Now, this Aquaforce user, let's just call him Aquaforce user because I don't want to remember names, he had this very sort of goofy, ridiculous thing with Rive. They apparently went all over the world challenging warring card fight feuding states. It was so weird. I just kept laughing. I mean, look, Dio is telling us the story, so how can you not grin the whole way through? But what ultimately ended the journey, I was expecting it to be like, well, what ended the journey? Well, the other guy got too obsessed and was too into battle and destruction. What ended the whole thing was a very realistic thing that does happen, and that is Rive wanted to get married. The weak constitution line, I assume, will come into play later. Weak constitution, whenever I see that in anything, always feels like a loaded phrase. Like, you can never really assume where that's going. I hope that will be explored later. Also, Baby Chrono was in this. That's kind of weird. But yeah, no, like, he went off to get married and go live a real life, to take care of someone who's important to him, and to, like, actually raise a family and move on from Vanguard. A thing this guy didn't like, and a thing that these anime rarely are willing to tell us, that eventually you will have to dial back on your hobby. Like, you will have to have responsibilities and things you have to take care of, like a wife and child. And though you will get happiness from having those responsibilities and having those people in your life, it doesn't change the fact that it sucks to give up what was important to you. It doesn't change the fact that Rive flat out says, yeah, he had to give up a dream, and that kind of sucks. Even if he is happy now, he kind of lost a lot. And that is sort of this realistic thing about growing up, and I like the way the episode sort of goes about it, because ultimately the other guy doesn't really ever seem to make peace with it, because at the end he's like, oh, we'll card fight if your wife gives you permission. He still doesn't get it, and you still have, like, Kanzaki, who is still just like, winning is everything, losing is horrible, I don't care about anything else besides card fight, giving it up is bullshit. And if we kind of infer from what happened in G, and from what we can assume will happen in these characters' futures, Kanzaki's never going to get over it. He's never going to grow up and try to have a family and make bonds beyond just rivals. And we're going to see it's going to make him into a horrible person who really lives a shitty life. So yeah, that's kind of an interesting thing to infer. And I thought the whole thing was handled very well and with a real sense of maturity, and I like that. Again, if my theory about the animals sort of being this representation of that is to be believed, really worked effectively. But that wasn't where it all ended, because another bond we have going on here is Eska and Nanami. Also, last thing to say about the Shin thing, it's interesting that Shin didn't assume there was a deeper problem going on. He just assumed it was about running from a fight. Also feeds into the idea Shin still has growing up to do and still has accepting to do before he can be a proper father figure to Misaki. But anyways, moving on to the Eska and Nanami thing. When this started, I wasn't quite sure where it was going, but I thought that they were very clever with where they brought it to. So, Eska and Nanami have this sort of dynamic well, I'm using the wrong word. Nanami sees that Eska is about to be harmed, or is at least afraid of a big cat. Yeah, cougars apparently are just cute, cuddly pets, so you just need someone who will, like, talk to them at their level in this universe. Yeah. But no, so Nanami goes to save Eska. And what is sort of important about this is that it kind of flips the dynamic a little bit. Eska is not the person in charge in this scene. Nanami is. And Nanami's strength and her ability and love of cats is actually what gets Eska out of a jam. This puts us in a position where we know that we're going into the scene, we've already seen Eska be vulnerable and Nanami be independent and strong. So we have this feeling going into it that the scene is not being manipulative. Eska isn't being manipulative to Nanami, and that Nanami is thinking for herself and is more than just a henchman in this bit. And what we get is this sort of nice little scene, and I really like the way Eska is handled in this scene. Now, they could, if they wanted to make Eska just a generic villain, they could reveal that Eska is trying to manipulate Nanami through her desire to appeal to her. That she wants Nanami to get stronger to fight Shin later. But it's actually very just simply put, Eska with a very just nice tone is just sort of like, I understand you can't do this. It's fine. You are great, and I care a lot about you. It's just, I just need someone else to deal with the one thing you can't do. And Eska's whole thing, she's not being manipulative. She's not putting on theatrics. She's just like, very nurturing tone is just like, it's okay. You have your feelings, and I can just get someone else to do it. It's not a big deal. Which is a very thing parents have to often do. They often have to tell their children, it's okay. Someone else can deal with it. It's not your fault. It's not your problem. It is my own thing. It is perfectly fine. But to Nanami, who is still a kid, to a kid, something like that means everything. Kids want to feel like they're worth something. Kids want to feel like they're strong, and when they put a lot of that emphasis onto a parental figure and then have that taken away, yeah, it does make them feel powerless and mess with their head a bit. And Eska isn't trying to do any of that intentionally. She's simply doing what she thinks is the right thing to do, but doesn't realize how that affects Nanami. And that's not because she's a bad person. It's just because, well, she's a person, and Nanami is also a person. And I like the bit where she hugs the cat, and I like that the big jungle cat leaving the scene is sort of this indication that, no, there's something more serious and something more relatable and dramatic going on, and Yeah, it's a really nice bit, and I think that sort of whole through line is what really holds these two episodes together and will hopefully be the driving force. Which is a interesting sort of segue into both the TCG question of the Vanguard question of the week and a little speculation for the future. So this week, Chronofang was confirmed will be the next round of gear support. This changes all our theories because we all assumed Chronojet and Altmile and Asha were coming back, but now this sort of changes things, or does it? We don't really know. But speculation time, the prequel will go a bit longer, and we're going to get into the Myojin stuff. Which, yeah, that's a little worrisome. But we also have going into the TCG, this means that premium gears are going to take a very different direction, and it also means, well, actually, Zodiac Time Beasts are still a good play deck, but this also means that, well, does this mean gears will have a lot of support coming up? Will we get that problem we had during G where they just kept getting shit because a major antagonist has them and then Chrono's going to have them? So it's a weird thing to worry about, and I want to know what you think about it. I'm genuinely curious to hear everyone's thoughts. But yeah, that is that for this week's episode of Cardfight Vanguard. Maybe you think I'm overthinking this, but I choose to believe there is a deeper meaning to all this. But tell me about that below. And as always, click to like, click to subscribe, and join me next week to see Dio just be Dio.